I'm not getting murdered tonight just because the subway shut down, Cassidy Elmore muttered, hugging her coat tighter as the icy wind sliced across Lexington Avenue. Her heels were already killing her from the charity event she'd just worked, and now every cab she flagged either sped past or was already taken. A yellow cab slowed to a crawl beside her, its headlights washing her in gold. She rushed to the handle only for a tall figure to reach it at the same time. Seriously, she snapped, looking up. The man blinked at her. Dark hair, strong jawline, expensive coat. I was here first. Cassidy narrowed her eyes. You were across the street. But I saw it first. I touched it first. He let out a quiet sigh, his breath forming a cloud in the air. Fine. We're both freezing. Let's split it. She hesitated. He didn't look like a serial killer. In fact, he looked like he belonged in a GQ spread, but that didn't mean he wasn't dangerous. I'm going to Astoria, she said. Upper East Side, he said. We'll drop you first. Cassidy hesitated another beat, then opened the door and slid in. He followed and gave the driver both addresses. Silence stretched between them as the cab pulled into traffic. She glanced sideways. So, do you always offer cab sharing to strangers? He looked at her, amused. Only when they're about to throw elbows in the street. Cassidy let out a surprised laugh. Fair enough. I'm Callum, he said, offering his hand. Cassidy hesitated, then shook it. His grip was warm, firm. Cassidy. Nice to meet you, Cassidy. She studied him out of the corner of her eye. His coat looked stupid expensive. The watch on his wrist gleamed under the streetlights. The cab's shadows softened his features, but he had the kind of bone structure that had to be expensive somehow. You coming from somewhere fancy? She asked. Dinner. Sort of a business thing, he said lightly. You? Event staff. I work with a catering company. Something flickered in his eyes. Long night. Too many people with too much wine and not enough manners. He laughed then, low and warm. Sounds like half the people I know. The cab jostled slightly as it turned onto the bridge. Cassidy tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. So what do you do exactly? She asked. Callum paused, then said, let's just say, real estate. She raised a brow. That's vague. He grinned. I'm not trying to be mysterious. I just hate talking shop. They lapsed into a comfortable quiet. The city blurred past in streaks of light. The cab pulled onto her block and she reached for her wallet. Callum stopped her. I've got it. What? No. He already handed the driver a bill. I insist. Cassidy frowned. You don't even know me. No, he said, looking at her, but I'd like to. The words hit her more than they should have. She felt her cheeks flush. She opened the door, stepping out onto the sidewalk. Thanks, Callum. He leaned over before the door shut. You forgot something. She turned back. What? He held out a sleek black card. In case you ever need a ride again. Cassidy took it, her fingers brushing his. She looked down. No logo. Just a name and a number. Callum Kessler. The cab pulled away before she could say anything else. She stared at the card in her hand. Weird, but kind of thrilling. Cassidy tossed the card on her dresser and forgot about it for 3 days until her roommate spilled wine on her only good blazer and she had a last-minute interview for a gallery assistant job. Out of options and late, she remembered the card. She called the number. A car showed up within 7 minutes. It wasn't a cab. It was a sleek black Range Rover. And Callum was behind the wheel. You're actually driving? She asked, stunned as she slid into the passenger seat. Callum grinned. I had a feeling you'd call. You didn't send a driver? Nope. She shook her head. Do you always personally chauffeur women who split cabs with you? Only the ones I'm hoping say yes to dinner. Cassidy stared at him. You're kidding. I'm not. Dinner. This Friday. She hesitated. You don't even know me. I'd like to, he said again, softer this time. She should have said no. She said, okay. Friday came faster than expected. He picked her up in a black town car this time, and Cassidy almost didn't recognize herself in the mirror sleek black dress. Heels that didn't scream bargain bin, and lipstick that cost more than she liked to admit. He took her to a rooftop restaurant in Midtown, the kind of place with a dress code and no prices on the menu. "I feel underdressed," she said as they sat by a window overlooking the skyline. "You're perfect," he said without hesitation. She looked at him. "You're smooth." "I'm honest." The food was incredible and the wine even better. But it wasn't the view or the food or the polished silverware that made her chest feel tight. It was him. The way he listened. The way he leaned in when she talked. The way he looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. "You're not just some real estate guy, are you?" she asked over dessert. Callum's eyes flicked to hers. "What makes you say that?" "Because people don't just casually drop $1,000 on dinner and then pretend it's nothing." He hesitated. "You want the truth?" "Only if it's not going to ruin this," she said. "I'm a developer. I own a few buildings. A couple companies. I'm a billionaire." She blinked. "Oh, still want dessert?" Cassidy stared at him, then laughed, loud and shocked. "You're unreal. I get that a lot." He walked her to her door that night and kissed her softly, no pressure. No rush, just a promise. Cassidy watched him walk away and felt her heart already trying to chase after him. She'd only meant to split a cab. She never meant to fall into the life of a billionaire. And she definitely didn't mean to fall for him. But she was starting to think it was already too late. Cassidy hadn't planned to see him again so soon. But 2 days after the rooftop dinner, a sleek envelope arrived at the gallery where she just started interning. Her name was handwritten in elegant ink on the front no return address. Inside was a single card, an invitation to a private art showing at the Kessler Foundation, one of the most exclusive venues in the city. There was no +1 line, no RSVP instructions, just a time, a date, and a note at the bottom in the same handwriting. "Would love to see what you think." "See?" Cassidy stared at it for a long moment, then tucked it into her coat pocket before anyone could notice. That Friday night, she stood at the edge of the Kessler Foundation's marble entrance, watching glossy black town cars pull up and elegant guests step out like they belonged there. She could already feel the sweat under her collar. The dress she'd borrowed from her roommate hugged her frame a little too tightly and the heels pinched, but she'd made it, even if her nerves nearly turned her around twice. When she stepped inside, the warmth hit her first, then the low hum of polite laughter, the clink of champagne glasses, and the soft notes of a live quartet hidden somewhere behind a curtained arch. The space was all glass and gold fixtures, wide open and glowing. "Cassidy!" She turned. Callum stood a few feet away, dressed in a black tailored suit that fit him like it had been made for no one else. His tie was undone slightly, just enough to make him look like he didn't care how perfect he looked. "You came," he said quietly, stepping closer. "I still don't know how this isn't breaking, like 10 rules of dating," she said, keeping her voice low. "Inviting someone to an event you clearly own?" "I don't remember any rules," he said. "Just that I wanted to see you again." He offered her his arm, and despite every voice in her head warning her to stay grounded, she took it. He guided her through a wing of the gallery she hadn't known existed. The walls were lined with pieces that hadn't been released to the public: intimate portraits, abstract pieces with bold textures, and one installation involving suspended glass that shimmered like ice in the low lighting. "This isn't open to anyone else?" she asked. "Not tonight," he said. "Just you." She looked at him sharply. "You shut down an entire wing for me?" "I didn't say that," he replied. "You assumed." "Did I?" He tilted his head. "You're not easily impressed, are you?" "That depends," she said, walking past him to study a canvas painted entirely in shades of ash and slate. "Is this one yours?" Callum stepped beside her. "It's by a friend of mine. He paints in silence for days at a time. Says he doesn't stop until he hears his own breathing." Cassidy glanced at him. "That's terrifying." "It's commitment," he said. "You'd be surprised how rare that is." She turned back to the painting, watching how the brushstrokes bled into each other like smoke. "You don't talk like most men I've met," she said. I don't think like most men you've met. She looked up. That's not always a good thing. I know, he said, and for the first time his voice lost its easiness. But I'm not trying to impress you. No, she asked, surprised. I'm trying to be honest. For once. Cassidy stared at him, unsure what to say. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wasn't sure if I should give you this. She took it, unfolded it, and stared. It was a job offer. Not from his company. From the Kessler Foundation's curatorial department. Her name was typed at the top. There was a salary listed. A real one. Enough to pay off her loans and stop hopping between internships and side gigs just to get by. She looked up, heart pounding. Are you serious? Callum's face was unreadable. I didn't mention your name. I told them to evaluate you based on your work. Your supervisor at the gallery sent over your portfolio. They were impressed. You didn't push this? I didn't have to. Cassidy folded the paper again, tight in her hands. You realize how this looks, she said after a moment. I do. And you still handed it to me. I trust you to know the difference between an opportunity and a bribe. Cassidy laughed under her breath, not because it was funny, but because she had no idea what else to do. You're not making this easy, she said. I don't want easy, he said. I want real. Someone called his name from across the room, a man in a tuxedo with silver cufflinks and an impatient wave. Callum nodded once but didn't move. I can wait, he said. Or I can walk away now. But I won't pretend. Cassidy didn't answer. She couldn't. Her head was spinning, her heart somewhere between her heels and her throat. She watched him step away, his shoulders squared, his presence impossible to ignore even as he disappeared into the crowd of silk dresses and champagne flutes. She glanced back at the offer in her hand. Real. That word echoed in her head long after she left the gallery. The following week, she accepted the position. Not because of him, she told herself. Because she'd earned it. Their next meeting wasn't planned. She found him on the third floor of the foundation during her orientation, leaning over a scale model of a new exhibition space. He didn't look surprised to see her. I heard you started, he said. I thought you'd be busy with your empires. I make time for what matters. She crossed her arms. You're relentless. No, he said, stepping closer. I'm invested. She hesitated. This can't happen here. I'm not your boss. You're part of the board. I'll step down. She blinked. You do that. He didn't flinch. In a second. Cassidy tried to breathe, tried to think past the heat crawling up her neck. You're not going to make this easy, are you? Callum shook his head. I'm not going to let something real walk away because it's complicated. And for the first time since they met, Cassidy didn't have a comeback. Because her heart was already answering for her. Cassidy stood behind a glass display case, carefully arranging a new set of sculptures for the upcoming exhibit. Her hands moved with precision, but her mind was elsewhere on the way Callum had looked at her the last time they spoke, like she was something rare. Something he couldn't risk losing. She hadn't seen him since that conversation on the third floor. He hadn't called. Hadn't stopped by. And she hadn't reached out either. It wasn't avoidance. Not exactly. It was restraint. Or maybe fear. She was barely keeping her balance in this new world. Her role at the Kessler Foundation came with a sudden surge of expectations, meetings, deadlines, high-profile guests. She was working harder than ever, and yet everywhere she turned, there were whispers. Soft ones, but they're all the same. She's young. Came out of nowhere. Funny how quickly she moved up. Cassidy didn't have proof, but she could feel it. The scrutiny. The doubts. One misstep would ruin everything she'd worked for. So she stayed silent. Until a message came through her supervisor midweek, a request to accompany a donor liaison to a private estate for an art acquisition review. Last minute but top priority. She agreed without hesitation. The estate was an hour outside the city, nestled in a forested stretch of land that looked like it belonged in a European film. Security waved her through the gates without asking her name. That should have been her first clue. The second came when she stepped inside the house. Callum was leaning against a grand piano, sleeves rolled, speaking quietly with an older couple dressed in navy and pearls. He looked up. Their eyes locked. The room fell away. Cassidy's breath caught. but she forced herself to keep walking, clipboard tight against her chest, spine straight. "You didn't mention this was your estate," she said, stopping a few feet from him. Callum gave a small nod to the couple, who excused themselves with warm smiles and disappeared down a hallway. "I didn't want you to say no," he said. "That's not how professional requests work. I made a donation. The foundation asked me which liaison I preferred. I named you." "Why?" "Because I wanted to see you," he said simply. Cassidy's lips parted, but she couldn't find the words. She glanced around the room. Instead, high ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, a sculpture garden visible through the glass. Every inch of the house was breathtaking. "You live here?" she asked. "Sometimes. I come here to think." There was a pause. "You didn't call," she said finally. "I didn't want to put pressure on you. You looked like you needed space." "I did." "And now?" he asked. Cassidy looked at him. "I don't know." He walked toward her, slow and careful. "Then let's figure it out on neutral ground." "This isn't neutral." He smiled faintly. "Then let's make it neutral." She followed him through a set of glass doors onto a terrace that overlooked a lake framed by tall sycamores. The air was crisp, the water still. A small table had been set with coffee, pastries, and a thick folder resting at the center. She raised an eyebrow. "This your idea of subtle?" "The art is real," he said. "It's a collection I'm donating." "I need your opinion." She sat across from him, flipping open the folder. Inside were photographs, provenance reports, and valuation documents. She recognized several of the piece's mid-century abstract works, a few early impressionists. "These are worth millions," she said quietly. "I know. You're giving them away?" "I don't collect for profit. I collect because I believe beautiful things should be seen." Cassidy looked up. "You could sell these and fund half the city's galleries." He leaned forward. "I'd rather give them to one." She closed the folder. "You're not making this easy." "I'm not trying to." There was a long silence. She reached for the coffee and took a slow sip, gathering her thoughts. "I don't know how to do this with you," she said finally. "You mean us. I mean me. I've always had to fight for everything. I don't know how to stand still and let someone offer me anything without wondering what it costs. You think I want something from you? I think you want me to trust you. And I don't know how to trust someone who can buy the world and still look like it's not enough." Callum didn't flinch. "I've had more than most people dream of, but I've never had someone look at me the way you do. Like I'm just a man. Not a name. Not a number." She looked down, unsure how to answer. "I don't want to change your life," he said softly. "I want to be part of it. If you'll let me." Cassidy stood, walking to the edge of the terrace. The lake shimmered in the late afternoon light. "You don't know what you're asking." "I do," he said behind her. "I'm asking for a chance." She turned to face him. "There's going to be fallout. If we date, people will talk. They'll make assumptions. And I can't lose this job, Callum. I can't afford to be someone's scandal." He stepped closer but didn't touch her. "Then let's not rush. No headlines. No appearances. Just you and me, outside all this. And if that's not enough, then I'll wait." Cassidy studied him, every inch of her wanting to believe him. To believe that this wouldn't blow up her carefully rebuilt life. "I want to say yes," she whispered. "Then say it." She took a breath and nodded. Callum reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. His grip was warm and steady, like an anchor in a storm. They stood in silence as the wind moved across the water, and for the first time in weeks, Cassidy didn't feel like she was balancing on the edge. She felt solid, seen, and maybe, just maybe, ready to fall. The first time Cassidy saw her reflection in the towering glass of the Kessler Tower ballroom, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her hair was swept into a soft twist at the nape of her neck, her navy gown hugging her waist and falling in clean, elegant lines to the floor. The diamond studs at her ears had been a last-minute surprise left in a velvet box on her desk with a note that simply read, "Tonight is for you." Callum hadn't signed it. He didn't need to. The gala was the largest event the foundation had ever hosted, and Cassidy had spent weeks helping curate the debut of a new collection, a blend of modern sculpture and interactive light installations that drew in critics, collectors, and city elites alike. It was the kind of night she used to watch from behind catering trays. Now, she was listed in the program as one of the lead curators. And somewhere in this room, Callum was waiting. She found him near the center of the ballroom, surrounded by a small circle of city officials and international donors. His suit was charcoal, his stance relaxed but commanding. He looked up as if he'd felt her approach, and for a moment, the room seemed to pause. "Excuse me," he said to the group, stepping away without hesitation. Cassidy met him halfway, her pulse steady but her thoughts racing. "You look like power," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. "And you look like trouble," she answered. "Always." She glanced around. "You're supposed to be working the room. I've done enough handshaking for one night. Besides, I'd rather work the room with you. Together." "Actually," he said, reaching into his pocket, "I had something else in mind." Cassidy stiffened slightly. "If you pull out another gift, it's not jewelry." He handed her a folded envelope. She opened it, frowning as she scanned the contents. A plain itinerary. 2 tickets. Paris. She looked up sharply. "You're kidding." Callum shook his head. 3 days. Just us. No boards. No galleries. No obligations. I can't just disappear. You have 3 personal days banked. I checked. And I already cleared it with the foundation president. You went through my file? I didn't need to. He offered it when I mentioned you've worked 18-hour days for the last 2 weeks. Cassidy folded the paper, heart thudding. You planned a trip without asking me. I didn't book it until I was sure. I just hoped. You do realize this is insane? Absolutely. She studied him. And what happens when we come back? Whatever you want. He reached for her hand, interlacing their fingers gently, his touch grounding her. Paris isn't a test, Cassidy. It's a pause. A breath. You've been running for so long, I want you to see what it feels like to just exist. With me. Without pressure. Her gaze softened. You're not afraid of falling. I already did. She didn't speak, didn't answer. Instead, she leaned in, resting her forehead against his chest, letting herself breathe. The sound of the gala faded beneath the quiet certainty inside her. 3 days later, Cassidy stepped out of a private car and into the morning light spilling across Rue Saint-Honoré. Her coat was wrapped tight against the breeze, and Callum's hand was warm in hers as they walked past shuttered boutiques and early cafes setting out their chairs. They didn't do museums or guided tours. They wandered. They got lost in cobbled alleys and ate pastries on park benches. At night, they found jazz clubs tucked beneath crumbling arches, and Cassidy danced barefoot on wooden floors that smelled like old wine and rose perfume. She laughed more in those 3 days than she had in years. By the second night, she stopped worrying about how it looked. By the third, she stopped thinking about what might fall apart. It was on that final night, standing on the balcony of their suite above the Seine, that Cassidy turned to him. I don't want to go back to who I was before I met you. Callum reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. You've never changed. You just stopped hiding. She took a breath. I love you. His reply came without hesitation. I love you more than I ever thought I was capable of. She smiled, but her eyes burned. He didn't need a grand gesture. He didn't need a rooftop or a crowd or a speech. The weight in his voice was enough. They returned to New York quietly. No press releases. No announcements. But people noticed. The way Callum stood a little closer when she spoke. The way he watched her across rooms like the world narrowed to just her. The way she moved like she finally belonged. 1 month later, on a Tuesday morning, she walked into her office to find a single envelope on her chair. Inside was a letter of resignation from Callum. He'd stepped down from the board. No explanation, no fanfare. Just a handwritten note at the bottom. So they'll never question how you got here again. Cassidy blinked back tears, pressing the paper to her chest. She found him waiting outside the foundation, leaning against a car with 2 coffees in hand. You didn't have to do that, she said, walking up to him. I know. I never asked you to. You didn't have to. She looked at him, her heart full. You really would give up your place in the world for me? I didn't give up anything, he said. I just moved. He handed her one of the coffees. Besides, I have a new project. She narrowed her eyes. What kind of project? He looked over at the brownstone across the street, run down, ivy-covered, beautiful beneath the grime. I'm turning that into a community gallery space. Free admission. Rotating exhibits. Local artists. You'll curate the opening. He said it like it was inevitable. Cassidy laughed, stunned. You're impossible. And you're the only thing I've ever been sure of. She stepped into him, hands on his chest. You still think about the first night we met? Every day, he said. You were fire in a freezing wind. I knew the second you opened that cab door. And now I know I'm never letting you go. She kissed him hard, the city swirling around them, and for once she didn't care who saw. Because she wasn't afraid anymore. The girl who split a cab with a stranger was gone. In her place stood a woman who had found something wilder, richer, and more consuming than she ever imagined. Love that didn't ask her to change. Love that met her exactly where she stood. Love that stayed. The early autumn sun filtered through the tall windows of the new gallery space, casting soft golden light across the freshly painted walls. Cassidy stood barefoot on the smooth wooden floor, her arms crossed as she took in the final installation. The rotating sculpture exhibit had just been completed, and the first community artists were scheduled to arrive later that afternoon with their pieces. The space smelled faintly of sawdust and citrus polish, fresh and full of potential. Callum leaned against the far wall, watching her with quiet pride. A folded blueprint tucked under his arm, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly mussed from working with the renovation crew that morning. You're staring, she said without turning around. I'm admiring, he corrected. She glanced over her shoulder. You're supposed to be checking the lighting grid. I did that an hour ago. You've just been too focused to notice. Cassidy walked toward him, her bare feet silent against the floor. You're not used to being ignored, are you? I'm getting better at it, he said. Especially when it's for art. I still can't believe this place is real. It wasn't, he replied. Until you said yes? She rested her head against his chest, exhaling slowly. Do you ever miss it? The board. All of it. The spotlight. The power. No, he said without hesitation. The only thing I ever wanted more than control was someone who made me want to let go of it. Cassidy tilted her head back to study him. You're different now. Because of you. No, she said softly. Because you let yourself be. He kissed her forehead, his hand skimming the curve of her spine. I got a call this morning. From who? An old partner. He offered to buy out my shares in the Upper East Side property. The one with the penthouse. She raised an eyebrow. The one with the rooftop garden? That's the one. Let me guess you're considering it. I already did it, he said. Closed this morning. Her mouth parted. But that property is worth a lot. But I don't need it. She took a step back, eyes narrowing. You love that building. I used to, he said. But I love you more. Cassidy was quiet for a moment, absorbing the weight of it. You know I didn't ask you to give up anything. I know, he said. But I realized that holding on to things just to prove I can isn't a life. It's a habit. She wrapped her arms around his waist. So what now? Now I focus on this place. On you. On building something that actually lasts. Later that afternoon, the first artists arrived: 3 painters, a ceramicist, and a local high school student who had never shown her work publicly before. Cassidy greeted each of them by name, offering warm smiles and helping them find their spaces. Callum stayed back, watching from the office doorway, his presence more supportive than commanding. By evening, the gallery was alive with color and motion. The artists were laughing, arranging their pieces, and brainstorming ideas for the opening night. Cassidy moved among them like she'd done it for years, her confidence quiet but unmistakable. After the last artist left, she returned to the office where Callum sat on the couch, typing something on his laptop. You've been here all day, she said, curling beside him. He closed the screen. So have you. I don't think I've ever loved anything this much, she said. Besides you. He brushed his thumb across her cheek. I was thinking about something earlier. I want to ask you something. And I don't want the answer now, or even tomorrow. Just when it feels right. She sat up slightly, heart skipping. What is it? He reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out a small, square box wrapped in deep blue velvet. He didn't open it, just held it between them. I want to marry you, he said simply. Not because it's time or because we're supposed to, but because I can't imagine a future that you're not at the center of. Her throat tightened. Callum, you don't have to say anything, he said. You've already given me more than I ever thought I'd have. I just wanted you to know it's here, whenever you're ready. Cassidy stared at the box, her gaze flicking up to his. I don't need time, she said. He blinked. I'm ready now. He opened the box. Inside was a delicate platinum band with a single round diamond, simple, luminous, and utterly timeless. She let out a shaky laugh. How did you know? I didn't, he said. I just hoped. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. They didn't tell anyone for a week. When they finally did, it was during the gallery's soft launch, surrounded by artists and friends and curious locals. Cassidy stood beside Callum in a deep green dress, the ring catching the light as she held a glass of champagne. The announcement came quietly, tucked between thank yous and an invitation to explore the exhibit. The applause was warm, genuine. There were no whispers this time, only joy. A month later, they were married in a botanical conservatory outside the city, surrounded by ivy, orchids, and soft candlelight. There were fewer than 50 guests. No press, no headlines. Just vows whispered beneath glass and stars and a kiss that sealed a promise already written into the rhythm of their days. Cassidy walked barefoot across the marble of their new home that night, an old brownstone they'd renovated room by room together. Her heels dangled from her fingers, her hair loose from its pins. Callum stood by the window, tie undone, watching her with the same awe he always had. You're staring again, she said, still admiring. She walked to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. So this is what forever looks like? No, he said, kissing her temple. This is just the beginning. And it was, because they built a life together not in the shadow of wealth or ambition, but in the light of something deeper. A love that grew without condition, a trust that never asked for proof, and a future that, for the first time for both of them, felt entirely and wonderfully like home.